So Alvin Graylin is the president of HTC, and he is the president of HTC China. It's a Taiwanese-based consumer electronics company, makes phones as well as VR headsets, and we are really pleased to hear from him. Take it away.
All right, thank you, Susan and Adam, for the invitation. It's an honor to speak with this group. I actually spent some time yesterday listening to a lot of the presentations and discussions, and found it very insightful. So you guys have a really good group of both speakers and attendees there. So today, I guess I wanted to take a little bit of a different spin on things. Yesterday, I heard a lot of people talking about the I guess the negative side of this technology and the dangers. I think there definitely are positives and negatives to every technology. So I wanted to bring those out and really kind of implore everybody to see what we can do going forward, particularly as policymakers, to have a positive outcome for this technology. So thanks again for making time to hear what I got to say. As I mentioned yesterday, I think a lot of people think that the metaverse is here. They say, "Oh, I'm already building the metaverse." It's actually we're still a long ways from actually achieving a real metaverse experience. And hopefully by the end of this half hour, you'll get a sense of what is a true metaverse. What can we do to really bring about something that is going to be world changing in terms of societal changing, in terms of a technology and a platform and an experience that are going to help our next generation have a better world to live in. And really that is the potential of the technology. And I want to give you a sense of scale of kind of what this technology is I guess predicted to influence. I mean, depending on who you believe, whether it's Morgan Stanley or Goldman Sachs or Citibank, a lot of smart people, they're all predicting that by in the next 10 years or so, that this is going to be an $8 to $13 trillion type of a business, right, or industry. That's about actually a little, probably more than half of the U.S. current GDP, and a little bit less than the total GDP of China. So essentially thinking about adding another major country to the world economy. So I think that's might give you a little context of why I really care about this and why I think you should care. So metaverse is a term that people have bantered around about a lot, particularly last year or so. But I do want to kind of highlight some of the context of this, right? Pretty much all of the metaverse, the metaverse term itself actually came from Neil Stephenson in Snow Crash, but it's a dystopian novel, right? And a lot of people say, oh, metaverse is just like Ready Player One, or it's the Matrix. But if you look at, there's a common theme between all of these stories, is that they're all dystopian stories. They all have a shitty world, and so people escape that by going into the virtual world, right? Or in the case of Matrix, I guess they didn't have a choice. So in our case, we're actually ahead of that happening, and we can actually, I think, create an outcome where this virtual world actually makes the physical world better. It's not about escapism, and it's not about having a completely side digital twin that is not I guess consistent or not connected to the physical world. It's actually, I think, something that if we did it right, that it allows us to do things that we can't do in the real world, but it's not a way for us to completely escape. So we should be able to create a positive outcome for the physical world and the virtual world at the same time. So a definition of what the metaverse, a lot of people have been, I guess, debating even the last 2 days or last day within your conference, kind of what is the metaverse? How do you define it? And according to John Riccitiello, he's saying it's the next generation of the internet that is always real time, mostly 3D, mostly interactive, mostly social, and mostly persistent, right? So essentially just saying it is the next internet. For me, I actually make it even simpler. I say, hey, the metaverse is the internet that is turned into a 3D, primarily 3D content, so that we're moving from a 2D screen to a 3D screen And then we're really becoming part of that experience, and largely supported by AI to create the content, to create a lot of the interfaces like hand tracking, eye tracking, a lot of that, as well as the rendering, as well as a lot of the NPCs can be populated by AI to create a world that we really haven't seen before, and then consumed using XR devices. Now, it doesn't have to be consumed in XR devices because XR devices aren't very prevalent today, but you're going to get the best experience of that in an XR device. Now, if you go to the source, so Neil Stevenson actually just posted 2 days ago. He's saying the assumption that the metaverse is primarily AR VR isn't something crazy. In my last book, it was all VR. So just to give you a sense, I think that the importance of XR technology, AR, VR technology in the metaverse. So before we go into some of the details, I want to kind of take us back in history a little bit. So over the, I guess 100,000 years of kind of modern human existence, we've gone through multiple economic stages. Kind of in the hunting gathering stages, very local, small tribes, very little impact beyond what their current scope is. And then the pastoral type economy. And then we get into agricultural that allows people to actually come together, and then commercial trade, which allows cross-group, cross-border, cross-ocean type of commerce, that it really expands the scope of human impact. And then the Industrial Revolution came with steam power and machine power, assembly line, robotics, really taking the ability for productivity and scale and reach of humans to a different level. And over the last 30, 40 years, the digitalization of our world, right? And so that the next phase essentially is the spatial development phase, where that's going to create, I think, a even greater level of productivity, greater level of interconnectivity, and greater level of reach. And at each of these stages, different countries around the world had the biggest impact in terms of being the major power of the world that connected the world together, right? From the Genghis Khan pastoral days of 100,000 warriors controlling a landmass that is essentially all of Asia. Agricultural period where China was still the lead, and then you get into kind of the 400 or 500 years ago when the ships started going around the world, and Holland became a global leader. During the Industrial Revolution, the initial Industrial Revolution, Britain was the global leader, and then over the last 100 years, the U.S. has taken it. So whoever is able to take advantage of the major shift in economic stage, I think can become essentially the global leader. And I think that's an opportunity for whoever can do that now. And we are here. We are right at the transition point between a digital economy and a spatial economy. And if you look at the trend over the last, actually, so screens, we have tons of them in our lives. And it looks like over the last 100 years or so, 100 years ago, we didn't have any screens, right? But 100 years ago, we essentially had the first screen, 120 years ago, with the movie screens starting to come into people's lives. And over every decade or two, we would add a screen. And if you look at this type of a trend, you would think, hey, this trend is going to go on, and we're going to have tons and tons of screens more in our future. And the reality of what's going to happen is that all the screens that we have in our lives are going to be replaced by something like this, right? And very soon by something even smaller. That's our new XR device, the BiFlow. And it's right now the current kind of thinnest, lightest type solution, but very soon we're going to get to glasses, and then we're going to get into contacts. And by last week at AWE, I tried on kind of the second generation contact lenses that actually has built-in eye tracking and all these things at the show. So that technology is available. It's still years away, but essentially we're moving in a direction where we're going back to no screens again, right? Either all the screens are going to be on one device, and at some point it'll be a chip in the back of our head. So we're going to get closer and closer to a matrix type future. And so, we really, I guess, we can also look at kind of the technology revolutions over the last 40 years, where, I've been fortunate to be involved with pretty much all of these stages. And, I got my first PC when the IBM came out with their XT. I remember, well, I went to China during the early to mid 90s to help build the web and China consumer business there. And then in the mid 2000s, I actually went to China again and created the first search system for mobile, and was used by all 3 Chinese carriers. And over the last 7 years with HTC, I really helped to I guess support the launch of the VR business, and now the XR business. And I think, if you look at these, every 10 years there's a major technology revolution. But I think the XR type revolution is something that's going to take a lot more than 10 years to mature, because pretty much with all of these technologies, within 10 years, they were kind of going to be what they were going to be. And we didn't have a lot of advancements. Now we're essentially, adding another camera in the back, or maybe a little bit thinner, battery life a little longer. But mobile is not changing much. But I can tell you that the types of fidelity advancements possible in the XR space, we're not going to finish it for another 30, 40 years, or maybe longer. So this is going to be a very, very long stage, and probably the most impactful stage in terms of how it's going to change our lives. HTC is right now playing a major role in terms of whether in the professional space, in the all-in-one space, or in the thin and light space. We have the kind of best-in-class products. But I don't want to do an advertising for us. I actually want to be more focused on the content. So I do want to emphasize, what changes with this new hardware, right? Essentially, we've been trained over the last 30 years, 40 years of using keyboard, mouse, and touch screen as our major interface. What's going to change is that we will be moving to all natural interfaces, from your hands to your eyes to your body to even your brain, getting haptics, using virtual pens, all the things that you already know how to do, even as a baby, we can do it in VR. And this technology is going, because it's so natural and because it's going to be so impactful, it's going to grow. And Statista already says that, essentially we're at the point of where the iPhone was in 2007, right? The first year the iPhone sold about 6 million units. We sold last year about 11 million units. So we're kind of at the beginning of that point. So over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to get into the hundreds of millions and then probably the billions of units of these devices. And what's that going to change is it's going to take the same path that mobile has done over the last 10 years or so. Essentially growing at 460% in terms of media consumption, hours of use. If you look, mobile still has some room to grow. I think over the next few years, it will continue to be a larger and larger portion of total hours spent in media. But then I think there's going to be a big change in about the 4 or 5 year period where you start to see XR devices start to grow dramatically. We're going to find out that we're going to spend probably right now about 11 hours a day in total media. We're going to get to probably closer to 16, and about 10 of that is going to be in XR devices in about 10 years. Currently, you have or 10 30 years ago, I guess you've had these walled gardens in the internet. And as I said, I think the metaverse is just the next internet. So I think we take the analogy of what happened with the internet 30 years ago. Essentially, there was walled gardens like AOL, Prodigy, CompuServe. In the early 2000s, there was kind of Second Life that tried to be the first 3D worlds. Now you have a lot of other worlds like Roblox and Fortnite and VR Chat and Sandbox and Centraland. These guys are trying to be the walled garden networks of the current the metaverse era, right? But in time, I think they will have the same fate as what we had in the past. This technology is going to take I think 3 phases for it to fully realize. So I'm speaking very quickly because I have very little time and I want to leave some time for questions. But essentially the first phase is the walled garden phase, where everybody is trying to vie for their own little pocket of the universe. And then there will be regulated driven kind of regional walled garden phase, where most of it will be controlled by specific regions, and a small part of it will be fully interoperable between them. I think in the 5 to 10 year time frame, we're going to have the flip, where most of the world will be open and interoperable, and there will be pockets of closed off metaverse that are going to be regionalized or nationalized. And I actually think that China will probably be the first country to attain a full metaverse experience, and I'll tell you why. First is the willingness of the populace to accept new technology. You see that already with e-commerce, mobile payments, EV, AI, etc. The adoption of new technologies happens a lot faster in China. The broad and advanced telecom infrastructure, it has, I think, 60% of all 5G users out there. Essentially, every home is connected to gigabit fiber. Existing digital currency, that means that you have a unified currency, unified asset system that can be used across this metaverse. There's no discussion of which crypto to use, or even is there a CBDC. And common national ID system that is already used on all online systems today. If you're on social, you actually have to sign in with your national ID. And strong data privacy protection regulation, kind of like the GDPR that's happening in Europe, is already happening in China with the data security law and the personal information privacy law. And the government tendency to regulate business and actually enforce the policies. So we've seen that in crypto, several years ago, where it was banned, ICOs were banned. Gaming now, I think we talked about yesterday, going down to 3 hours a week for children under 18. AI is now being regulated in the sense of, people have a choice to use or not use AI in their social. Strong government support to enable digitalization. It's actually part of the 14th five-year plan of China, that it will support full digitalization of all aspects of work, learning, life, etc. And the speed of industry adoption, I think that's actually something that will happen in China faster than anywhere else, because once China puts out a rule, it gets adopted, and the companies use it. That doesn't really happen as well in the West. So I do want to point something out that I think there's a lot of confusion about, is kind of the difference between Metaverse and Web3. And a lot of people conflate the two, but they're not. So first, the Metaverse is really more about XR, natural UI, natural UX, 3D, etc. It's about open and immersive. It's about being used mostly in social and creating unique experiences. Web3 is really about crypto, it's about blockchain, about NFT, it's about decentralization, it's about kind of disrupting finance, creating transactions. Now, there's definitely an intersection of the two, and when the two come together, there are things they can do together that can't be done by itself. But there's no requirement for the two to have to integrate to exist. In fact, in China, as I mentioned yesterday, I don't think it will be a centralized metaverse, but it can be just as functional. Because it's using some of the same technologies, but not really focused on decentralization. So I think the way to think about it is, one is a 3D web, one is about Web3. So they're kind of different naming model for different things. One thing I do want to emphasize is that Web3 doesn't have a great reputation right now, right? Over the last, these are just headlines from the last few months or weeks. Axie Infinity was hacked for $600 million. NFT sales are down 92%. Bored Ape, the most famous NFT, has been hacked. Squid Game goes to zero. The Squid Coin, I should say. Crypto scams, $1 billion in the last year. Luna goes to zero. Even the Dogecoin founder specifically said, crypto, 95% of it is scam. Don't buy crypto or don't buy Dogecoin. So I mean, these kind of things are creating a bad taste in people. In fact, there are definitely a lot of challenges, I think, to making the metaverse successful, and here are the ones that I currently see. One is it's definitely overhyped. A lot of people are going to have over expectations, and that creates for people to be disappointed, an opportunity. So there's going to be huge impact in terms of privacy and security, importance of that, and we need to really be conscious and active about how to protect privacy and security, data security in this world. I think people are going to be afraid that if you're using it too much, it's going to affect your health. There's a potential issue for addiction. I'll share some studies with you guys. There are potential for bad actors to covertly influence people. I think this technology is definitely a very influential tool. A lot of people talked about empathy machine yesterday and the ability to reach. I'll actually share some data as well. And a lot of physical industries are going to be disrupted, and a lot of people are going to be displaced from their jobs. So how's that going to impact society? And I talked about the Web3 speculation and Ponzi schemes, rug pulls. Those are going to create a lot of bad taste that might go create negative impact. And the lack of international standards will slow down adoption in a lot of places. And I think there's going to be unknown things that we haven't thought about, just like with any new technology. Until it gets deployed, we don't know what the consequences are. So we need to kind of be careful about all of that. And the hype cycle, this is, even though this is a hot term now, it's really the kind of the flow of what we've been talking about, whether it's cyberspace or information superhighway. I think in a couple of years, we're going to have a new name, right? In fact, if you look at the Metaverse Google Trends graph, it looks a lot like the last chart, right? The last wave, the last chart. But the one thing that's interesting is that even though it's come down, I think 60, 70% from where it was in November, China is still the #2 most hottest region in terms of wanting to be participating in the metaverse, and it's something that's in news headlines every day. When I read Chinese news. Right? So in terms of the health issue, I'm actually less worried about that. I actually think that the fact that you have to move around in VR and you're using your full body, you're going to spend more energy than you do sitting around using typing today. In fact, we did a little study on exercise and found that it's actually more exciting. And then what's more interesting is that the retention on a month later of a group that was doing exercise in VR versus exercise in a gym is that you have 4 times more retention. And I think anybody that's joined the gym and in January and quit it in February, you can attest to that. So this phrase you probably heard a lot, right? The medium is the message. Marshall McLuhan mentioned this, probably 30, 40 years ago. But in this case, with XR, it's more so than anything else, because it is the most direct connection to your brain of any technology you've ever seen, and the most ability to influence the audience. And essentially every aspect of your senses, every sense will be capitalized in terms of getting that message to you. So we really need to be very careful how we utilize that.
Shareholders won't be happy.
Here's a clip from Ready Player One.
But once we launch this little baby, they're gonna, we call this Pure O2. This is the first of our planned upgrades. Once we can roll back some of Holiday's administrations, we estimate we can sell up to 80% of an individual's visual field before inducing seizures.
Okay, so that's a little bit more tongue-in-cheek, but what we did find is that, hey, if you're using VR to do advertising, you can get up to 7 times more interest and 2 times more trial than using video. That's pretty impressive. And so if you're advertising good things like go exercise, go walk more, go vote, great, but it could be used for other maybe negative impact. So we need to be very careful. There's always the fear, are people going to be addicted? We actually did a study on this, and with gaming, it's about 44% more addictive than using a PC game with the same game, right? On a flat screen. What we did find was that teens are going to be a little bit more likely, have higher tendency, and males are a little bit more high tendency. In social games, which are I think the ones I'm more interested in, it's actually 2.4 times more addictive, or have an index that's more addictive, which just because of its immersiveness, I think that makes a lot of sense. So we don't have to be too afraid, because I think we've also looked into how do we keep this from happening. If you rely on self-constraint, self-restraint doesn't really work. Over a kind of 3-week period, it actually goes down by about half. Auto reminders work well, but if you really was for something that's very important and you want to have sustained results, system mandates. I think the combination of auto reminders and system mandates together will give you the best results. And autumn reminders are essentially something that says at every hour, every 2 hours says, hey, maybe you should take a break. System mandates are saying, hey, it's been 2 hours, it's time to stop, and the system stops. So I'm running out of time, so I'm going to speak even quicker now. Children's interaction with NPCs, it's also found that it definitely influences attitude, and that attitude can lead to actual behavioral change at home, a month later, helping if they're improving tolerance, communication, cooperation, helping your parents, they actually report exactly those kind of improvements. Again, we're teaching tolerance, communication, cooperation. Could be hate and divisiveness and intolerance. So depending on what information that NPC is telling you, we really need to be careful. How do we do that? In terms of education, we did a study breaking down kind of already preset groups of underachievers, average students, and whiz kids, and then we did them the same training in VR and found that the worst kid in the VR group actually beat the best kid in the normal control group. What that pretty much tells us is that every kid is a genius. We just haven't been able to find a medium that's been able to get them excited and interested enough. And I think the reason that they're doing so well is because their concentration goes up by 6x. We're looking at their EEG waves, and we're showing that just by measurement. A week later, the scores are better than the best scores from the immediate test. There's a bunch of challenges that we need to, I think I'm going to run out of time, but these are really important actions that we need to take to ensure an open metaverse, right? We need to have better base technology. We need to have better networks. We need content creation tools that anybody can use. We need global interoperability standards, universal avatars, IDs, IPR, wallet systems so that transactions can happen, people can go across, and legal framework. We talked about legal framework in some of the sessions yesterday, and it's so important to make sure that there is the proper rights and enforcement inside this metaverse, because it is going to be the world that everybody interacts in, and it's the world that connects all the nations. Privacy, ID, advertising, taxation, crypto, child protection regulation, so that the weak are protected, and people's the important factors of people's lives are protected. And we need full alignment between international governments so that policies can be agreed on, so that protocols can be agreed on, so that investments are happening to make this happen, right? The value of a network is a square of its nose, and the bigger the node, the more open it is, the more value it brings to everybody on it. And so I leave you with one last thing, kind of policy maker reminders. I know there's a lot of important people here that are able to influence the future, but I do want to remind you that the metaverse is a public good. It is something like a utility, like a bus, like a road, things that the government should be paying for, because it delivers value, and it delivers value that is not about an individual or individual company. It delivers value to everybody on it, and and even people who are not on it, right? It is going to create a national advantage for whoever gets it first and builds their population and builds their economy on it, because it will make their population smarter, make them more productive, make them more international, and give them an ability to innovate. And the data ID and network security of this kind of environment is as important as physical security. So we're spending a lot of money on defense, on physical security, on making sure people are safe physically. We need to do that even more so in this environment. And it is an ability, I think, to provide full employment, because anybody who can put on a headset can work, and you can work for anybody else around the world. So if we're worried about unemployment, and particularly I think to create a global workforce, that is something that I think it is very, very powerful and creates value globally. Digital currencies and assets can greatly reduce waste, because you're no longer selling physical goods and shipping them across, and a lot of times you don't need that. And for a lot of governments who are concerned about corruption, if you can track how every dollar is being moved, it's a lot harder to hide money, and it's a lot easier to track corruption. So I think this actually will create a more efficient government as well. And more virtualized lifestyle will actually enable both a more egalitarian society as a more healthy, better climate, because we're traveling less, we're able to commute less, and the the world will no longer judge each other by what clothes they wear, what height they are, what color their skin, or how old they are. It'll be by your ability to contribute in this virtual world, because you're always being represented by your avatar, and your avatar can look like whatever you want to. So we no longer will judge people by their physical appearance. I think that creates a lot more ability. The other thing is, everybody has been saying your success in the future is mostly determined by where you're born and who your parents are. In this kind of a lifestyle, in this type of world, it's no longer the case. Everybody in the world has a chance to do anything. And I think a more educated population will actually also create a more effective democracy. I think everybody knows that. And we see that yesterday with the January 6th trials. By having different levels of education, different levels of understanding, it creates misunderstanding and conflict that doesn't need to be. And people can accept the vote because everybody can vote. You can have individual votes versus representative vote. And by spending less money on defense, we can spend a lot more money on building a better physical world. So that's all I really have for everybody. So I really hope that we can make a better verse, not a metaverse, because I think we need to actually have a new term and a more positive term that we can leave for our next generation. Feel free to follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn, and we can chat some more if you have additional questions. But I think I might be out of time. So thanks for your attention.
We have some flexibility.
Okay.
Really, I want to hear from you, and I want to open it up to questions. So does anyone have a question? Jennifer?
So I have two. The first is, and this is a quick question, the studies you were referencing, where can we find that study?
So send me an email, and send me an email, and I think Adam has my information, and Susan as well.
If that's okay with you.
Sure. So I'm happy to share, I think, with the folks of this group, because this is a very select audience. So
awesome. And then the second question I had was, you mentioned that a more educated populace will enable a more effective democracy, and that China is going to be, in your mind, one of the first adopters. So when it comes to a more effective democracy, are there any concerns from the Chinese Communist Party about whether you'll see these democratic tendencies emerging, or that could theoretically undermine control in some way, shape, or form? Are you seeing any kind of tension from a perception standpoint at all?
Not necessarily. I actually see the opposite. The Chinese government is trying to become a technology leader in all aspects. I think people see that, and in some ways the American government fears it. But I actually feel like it's a positive thing. Innovation happens and it gets spread around the world. So no matter what country creates something, it's going to create an opportunity for the learnings from that to spread around the world. And I think, as I mentioned yesterday in the panel, China will be a great test bed, because once a national metaverse becomes created, and all of the ramifications and all the social impacts of that can be seen, the learnings of it can be passed to the other parts of the world. I think that the Chinese government is seeing this as, hey, I can make an advantage for myself. If I get more people on this virtual world, they can learn better, they can become a more educated population, they can create more innovation. And more innovation, hopefully, at some point means more competitiveness on a global basis, right? So, maybe I'm being a little idealistic, but at least in the last 30, 40 years, China has been very pro-technology, pro-innovation, pro-change, and I hope that tendency continues.
Wait a minute. But the last 2 years have been a huge crackdown on monopoly platforms, et cetera.
I'll actually address that a little bit. I actually think that what the monopoly crackdown is a positive. It's something I think that the US should be doing, right? And we've been talking about breaking up Facebook or Google or Microsoft for decades, and hasn't done anything. And what they've pretty much said is, hey, there are now three companies in China that are essentially controlling the internet there. It's not healthy for a few companies to do that, because what they're doing is that by controlling it, they're stifling innovation. Small companies have no way to battle these big guys, because what they do is they just copy them and then they kill them. And the little guys you can't create any changes in that order. And what what the government has done by cracking down on some of these larger tech firms, I think it's actually giving a sign that, hey, antitrust, anti-monopoly should be enforced. So I don't see that as a negative. I actually see it as a short-term negative for a lot of maybe shareholders of these companies, but it's a positive for the country on a long-term basis.
And the government control and access to personal data acquired by these companies?
Yeah, so I think that's something that is a the amount of access of information and I guess the influence of the government in China over private enterprises, something that is going to be very different, and that's how they create order and harmony for a large population. And I have really no I guess right to say whether that's right or wrong, but it seems to be effective so far in the last at least few decades. And I think in terms of what they're trying to do in terms of creating a better good for a larger population, it's at least it's their intention. So. Got it.
Thank you. Okay, Kavya will be with you in a second. From the online audience asks about the environmental implications, especially.
Yeah. I think the environmental implications are going to be huge, because if you think about it right now, transportation accounts for something like 35% of total carbon emissions. If we're spending less time commuting, if we're spending less time doing business travel, if we're making less goods, I think manufacturing is also a thing under 30% of total emissions. If we're making less physical goods and we're driving a lot less than we need to, than we do today, that's a significant impact in terms of total carbon emissions, and that will allow the world to heal and be more sustainable. So it's going to take time for that to happen, but we see that it's very doable over the last couple of years with the pandemic and the people traveling less. We're still quite effective being virtual.
Okay, and I encourage the online audience to ask more questions. Kavya?
So, hey, Alvin, great points, and I really want to congratulate you for really highlighting some of these challenges, because oftentimes this, immense positivity is what everybody wants to highlight. My direct question to sort of HTC and yourself is how are you ensuring these challenges are addressed proactively, and how are you responsibly innovating over there at HTC?
Well, I mean, I think that's something that we've done very differently than other companies in the space. Is when I joined HTC and I talked to Chair Wang, our chairman, we really agreed that we're doing this technology not because we want everybody to play games, right? I mean, there are companies right now that are focused on gaming as the primary use case for VR or XR. We don't think so, and we're really about, if you look at what HTC's App Store has, it's mostly non-gaming focused. I think only 30% of our content is games. We actually shared a technology that we create with the rest of the world. We have this thing called the Live Wave program that have enabled I think 7 or 8 vendors in China and some of the international ones to utilize our standalone technology so that they can sell products at a lower price and get to market to help an audience that we can't reach with our price points. Our App Store is the only App Store that's available to every single vendor, including Oculus, including Valve, Microsoft, can all use our App Store. And we've been part of the open XR community and standards since the beginning, helping really create interoperability across the world. And we've been kind of spreading this story the whole time, and we do the kind of research I just mentioned, not ourselves, but we support researchers to independently come up with information, on health, on impact in terms of psychology, in terms of education, in terms of fitness, and in terms of social good, and we share that data all the time. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll see every few months I'll publish data of things that are happening, or publish research or surveys that we find about what we're learning around the world. And we're very open to making sure that the entire industry grows versus our just our business.
More questions from the audience? Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, you might have to do that, but could he address the?
I can't hear, sorry.
For censorship, could you?
Sorry, could you address the potential for censorship, especially if the metaverse is going to be run by a country known for that, such as China? Thank you.
First of all, I don't think the metaverse is going to be run by China. I think there will be a part of the metaverse, kind of the first segment of the metaverse that will probably happen in China. But the metaverse, as I see it, is essentially the internet today, and the internet is a global thing. So nobody's going to run it. Actually, nobody should own it. Nobody should control it, right? Because over time it will move into that last third stage, which is the open kind of user-driven stage. The first stage will be company-driven. The second stage will be maybe legally or policy-driven, and then the third stage will be user-driven. But the ability for countries to censor or change information will be the same as what it is today with the internet. So I really don't see a change in terms of extra powers. Because anything digital can be impacted. If the U.S. government wanted to shut down a particular website, it probably could, and same for any other government. And we see that right now in South Korea or North Korea, where essentially they can shut down all the websites, right?
Please.
Thank you. Yeah. So what is your probability estimate for China being the first, and what would move your probability estimate downwards? For example, like the US putting export controls on leading semiconductors or something like that?
No, I think the issues that are keeping it from happening is a lot more social and legal than it is technical. Because I think the technology to make it happen is already there. The devices are there, the networks are there, the tools are there. It's really about the willingness of companies to cooperate. And I don't think export controls will actually change that. The devices today, you can implement everything that I've said, you can implement on devices that exist 2 years ago, right? So, and a lot of the metaverse initially, a lot of the users will actually use their existing phones and their existing PCs to enter the metaverse. They're just going to be playing like a 3D video game versus having an immersive experience. But that network, the basis for making that happen, the technology is there. Now, how well it performs, maybe over time, whether one will have a competitive edge, or whose content will be able to move better. I think that's something that might change. And since this is a more of a software and infrastructure issue, if Chinese content, let's say Tencent or Alibaba, whoever wants to make content for the metaverse, they should also be able to take that same content and be on the public metaverse on the rest of the world. So I think that's something that I'm pretty sure that China will no matter what happens, China will have a metaverse experience first. Now, whether it becomes the global leader is something that might be impacted by technology sanctions. But I'm really honestly not a big fan of using technology sanctions as a way to slow down other countries, because we're I actually want to create a place where everybody's working together, where you're creating a global good, because this, as I said, the metaverse is a public good. And if it's a public good, then the public benefits from it, the global public in this case, because it is a technology without borders, right? If we got rid of the internet right now, which country benefits? Nobody, right? The reason that we have this global community, the reason I'm able to talk with you right now from around the world, is because we have this base technology out there. So I don't think we want to actually slow down innovation, create pockets, and isolate and bifurcate technology development. I actually think that's a negative for the world. What I would rather see as the U.S. government wants to do something is build better networks in the U.S. Get schools to utilize this so kids get better, earlier access to this technology. Have more programs to get these tools in the hands of developers so that the more content comes out. That's the kind of stuff that the industry needs, that will actually make the US more competitive versus trying to make somebody else less competitive.
Those are such good points. We have a ton of questions here, but we actually have to end. I was just wondering, at 12 o'clock, we have lunch, and 12:15, thanks for correcting me. I presume you're booked then, but if you're not, could we have more Q&A with you? I apologize, it's ridiculous to ask that of you. That said, there are so many people here that want to ask questions, but because we have other government officials coming up, we can't push them back at this point.
Yeah, actually, I think so. So yeah, I should be okay. So I'll dial back in at 12 o'clock your time.
Can you dial back in at 12:15, and we'll just, before we go for lunch, I really want to make sure that everybody gets their chance to ask questions, and there are so many questions, we have Munch online, and we will send that out to everybody. Thank you for being so gracious.
No problem. And thank you for giving me extra time. I really enjoyed the interaction with the group.
Well, I have some questions too for you. You won't enjoy it so much.
All right, thank you.